This is John-Henry Westen for LifeSite News, bringing you breaking news out of Rome. Pope Francis has just given an interview with the Associated Press in which he says that bishops who encourage anti-sodomy laws need conversion. In fact, he also adds that the church must even fight such anti-sodomy laws. This came in a new interview conducted with Associated Press. Pope Francis criticized bishops who maintain laws against sodomy in countries of Africa and elsewhere. He said, and I quote, "These bishops have to have a process of conversion." He called for tenderness, please God, as God has for each one of us, he said. Going further, the 86-year-old former Archbishop of Buenos Aires called any laws which criminalize sodomy unjust, adding that the Catholic Church must be involved in ending such laws. It must do this. It must do this, he stated. And it's clear from his remarks that Pope Francis was referring to acts of sodomy rather than the inclination towards such acts. The Church has always taught that while homosexual sexual acts are gravely sinful, the inclination or same-sex attraction is not sinful. It is an objectively disordered inclination, of course, but not sinful unless acted upon. Yet Pope Francis seems confused about this reality, as he said to the Associated Press, and I quote, "Being homosexual is not a crime. Being homosexual is not a crime." So he said, it's not a crime. Yes, but it is a sin. Fine, but let's first distinguish between a sin and a crime, he said, end quote.
Ser homosexual no es un delito. No es un delito. Sí, pero es pecado. Bueno, primero, distingamos pecado por delito.
So, he is obviously himself confusing this situation. And he either doesn't understand it or is trying to be smart with the media or whatever, I don't know. But nonetheless, being homosexual in the sense that you experience same-sex attraction is not a sin, despite what Pope Francis said. Acting on that inclination by engaging in homosexual sexual relations is a sin. And in some countries, it is indeed a crime. So, expanding on his comments on LGBT identifying individuals, Francis declared that we are all children of God, and God loves us as we are, and for the strength that each of us fights for our dignity. So, let's go through that again. He said, we are all children of God. God loves us as we are, and for the strength that each of us fights for our dignity. That's a little bit confusing, but there's, of course, very true what he says about God does love us all, with all of our various inclinations to sin, sexual and otherwise. God loves the young man who's inclined to sex outside of marriage, with his girlfriend or whatever. But when he acts on that inclination, it's a sin condemned by God and harming the young man and his girlfriend, harming them both physically, psychologically, but worst of all, spiritually killing them. Similarly, God loves the man tempted to look at pornography. There's no sin in the temptation, but there is sin in doing it, and God's anger also when he acts upon that sin. In looking at porn and the self-abuse that usually accompanies that, there's sin. In committing that sin, this man not only harms himself physically and psychologically, but he grievously harms his relationship with God, killing his relationship with God, which can only be repaired by sacramental confession. So God loves the man also who is abnormally inclined to sexual relations with animals. Even though it's a disordered inclination, there's no sin in having that temptation. However, when acted upon, it's a grievous sin. In addition to the harm that it causes the animal, it harms the man physically, psychologically, spiritually. In some countries, it is also a crime which can carry criminal penalties. So laws against sexual perversion in various nations are there for the protection of the population. Some states outlaw adultery because they see the grave harm caused to society by broken families and the massive cost to the state by the poverty, abuse, and neglect which flow in the wake of broken families. And it is similar in the case of sex before marriage, where some states recognize that without support, a woman can be left by a man with a child outside of wedlock, with venereal disease, and worse. So most of these laws are also, or they encompass also, rape and pedophilia. Even in America, in some states, there remain laws which forbid sexual relations between adults and minors. It is these laws which some bishops support in certain African countries. They do threaten criminal sanctions for harmful sexual acts, not for inclinations or temptations. Such laws do forbid the type of teaching of children in classrooms which encourages sodomy, the LGBT ideology, and more. In a statement provided to LifeSite, a theologian commented that, and I quote, "While not all sins should be made into crimes, Christian nations have generally treated homosexual activity as something harmful to society, which therefore needed to be declared illegal." He continued, "Recent experience shows the wisdom of this, since the repeal of laws against such activity has led everywhere to a general confusion and decline of sexual morality, and even to the scarcely credible situation of people being uncertain about the nature of men and women." So, while Pope Francis stated that the bishops who support anti-sodomy laws need conversion, in truth, it is Pope Francis who needs a conversion. And on this day, the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, will you please join me in praying for the conversion of Pope Francis? It certainly seems every day that Pope Francis is much more a persecutor of Catholics than was Saul prior to his being knocked off his horse. For LifeSite News, this is John-Henry Westen, and may God bless you. Hi everyone, this is John-Henry Westen. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSite News. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.